Anyone right now that goes to hire an experienced scanning person has to steal them from another company. And now that company needs to hire another one and steals it from someone else. Scanning is 20% of the job. Data is still one of the biggest problems with capture. Once you get through the workflows, which is still difficult, and scanner types, then what computer are you planning to use? Today, most people are not using something that is what it should be.
Lee was this really cool guy, had been retired, and he just told the story of how he renovated the Pentagon. That's this like amazing approach he used and all this stuff. And I mean, he was like meeting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he was like, wasn't he, I need to go back and listen to the facts of the episode.
No, he like went into like the president's office, went into the Oval Office.
No, there was all that kind of thing.
All that kind of stuff going on.
I'm talking about what he did before, though. He was like,
oh, no, he would do negotiations on satellites with the Russians.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
During the Cold War.
Pretty, pretty chill job.
Fun background,
Yeah, good background. But
they were like, you can negotiate with the Russians, but can you run a construction project?
Well, that was what he was saying, too, is he was trying to get on Zoom for our recording or whatever, and he was grumbling. He was like, I put satellites in space, and I can't freaking get this to work. I was cracking up like, oh my God. And like, sometimes people say that and you're like, haha, hilarious. But you were like, no, you like have legitimately put satellites in space.
Yeah. It's funny. As much as we all get on and talk about all this advanced technology, then it's like, sometimes you can't get the simplest thing to work.
It's
meeting
crazy.
Invites, webcam, the audio won't come into the right that you're like.
Dude, user experience is a big part of like where we need to enhance things, I feel like.
Yes. Yeah.
It'd be a fun place to start. Have you dug into user experience design at all? Like just kind of like the process and like kind of how it all works?
No.
Dude, freaking fascinating study.
Yeah.
I will not go into it, but I would suggest you do because you would geek out about this. And then you'll start looking around at some of, not all, but a lot of the products that we have in the industry and start going, yeah, guys, we got some work to do.
Oh,
here.
yeah. Yeah, I know it needs to be a big focus. It's a big part of the ease of using different tools, especially in our scenario with all this new technology. Like, we want people to adopt it.
Yeah.
And if it's something they've never done before or a platform they've never seen, the easier it is to use, the better the interface is, the better, the more likely to adopt.
Yeah.
Historically, like so many of the tools in our industry are complex. It's hard to get into. It's hard to use the data.
Yeah.
So I think it's a major focus. I think it's when it comes to things we've built, like even our website and stuff.
Yeah.
I personally have always leaned toward like, get it up quick, get the information that needs to be there. It doesn't matter if it's beautiful.
Yeah.
People on my team fill that other side of like, we have to make this interaction better. We need to make the checkout process easier. We need to make people able to add this and get the email once they check out. I'm like, I love all that. Like, I'm great. Somebody's caring about that.
Yeah.
But sometimes, when you're doing something new, it's like, there's got to be that balance of speed to get it out versus quality and
totally.
It's
a balancing act. It's just constant. You just got to constantly stay on it. And I feel like most of the time we release stuff and then we forget about it. We get distracted putting out other fires.
Yep.
Instead of actually enhancing the product. And I mean, we're just ticking off our clientele at that point. And I don't know. It's hard to build a business though.
It's hard to build a business.
I can trash talk that, like, oh yeah, you can't get your crap right. But like, oh my gosh, I know you're firefighting all the time too. So there's some empathy there. But
oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, dude. We've got to get better in that for sure.
Totally.
I want to start off with, you started a freaking conference, dude. Like you did the thing. Yeah. So we'll give you a shout out there for sure.
Thank you.
Where did that come from? Like where, walk us through. How did you do it?
Well, you want me to start right at how I built the conference or why?
Why? Why do you feel like you needed it? Yeah.
So, RCN was born out of trying to help people in the industry. I've been laser scanning for 14 years.
Yeah.
The early years, the first 5 years of me scanning, there was so much education that had to be done to people. Like nobody was asking for scanning.
Yeah.
I would have to do so much, lunch and learn, call somebody, like try to explain what it is that we do.
Yeah.
And, following people outside of our industry that are podcasters and are really big on social. I'll throw out Gary Vaynerchuk as one.
Yeah, of course.
So many people that are heavy in media know who that is. Yeah. But if you ask people in the built environment who that is, I bet you 3 out of 10 would even know who the name is.
Yeah.
That blows my mind because to me, following him, I'm like, man, everybody knows him.
Yeah.
I did a hand raise at our first conference and it was like several people out of hundreds. I was like, geez.
Yeah.
What I started to realize is I'm following these people that are using media very successfully to educate people. Mm-hmm. Yet I don't see people in our industry doing that.
Yeah.
And I had this problem of, okay, I'm trying to educate people on what is a laser scanner. How can it be used? How does it help different types of projects? And so those two paths finally during COVID had the time to launch. We had hired a scanning technician. And one of the things that I really liked about him, he had no scanning experience, but he had some video editing experience. Mm-hmm. I saw some things on his LinkedIn of like him creating some videos. He wrote a kid's book. And so this recipe finally fell in place that I was like, you know what? I think we should start a podcast to try to educate people.
Yeah.
So we just started throwing that together. That grew. One of my biggest things has always been LinkedIn, has been networking. Part of why I knew I could use the podcast was not necessarily the podcast itself or gaining podcast subscribers on audio only platforms. Mm-hmm. It was to take that content and put it into my LinkedIn and to put it to an audience and a community that I had already built.
Yeah.
As that started growing, COVID, all the events were shut down.
Yeah.
All the networking had stopped. I have been going to conferences since I started in business. LinkedIn and going to events is what helped me build relationships and build my company. Mm-hmm. So it was all of those recipes that were like, we have an audience. People are liking the podcast. People are wanting to learn more. People are wanting education. Conferences are shut down. What if we just try to put on an event? Because there's so many things I don't like even about other people's conferences. They don't put enough focus on it, on networking. You get all these classrooms and people get lost. And my favorite thing about events was networking, was, that kind of intimacy. So it really was just that idea. And as an entrepreneur, sometimes I move too quick, I think. But it was literally like, we should put on a conference. Well, the next week it was like, we were planning an event. Yeah. We were looking at venues. We were from idea, we picked a date 3 months out.
Yeah.
And it was find a venue. How could we fit vendor tables in here? What are we going to have on the stage? There's no breakout classes. It's just going to be presentations. I know a lot of people. Let's just announce it and just you hope at that point that it all falls together.
Somebody shows up.
As a first-time event, you have zero expectations. You have no idea.
Yeah.
Will a vendor pay to come to my first-time event when I cannot promise that there will be any audience?
Yeah.
Maybe. But I knew that the recipe that I already had with lots of followers, lots of network, I had a decent name in the industry for being a laser scanning expert. And so I was like, you know what? I had really good relationships with some of the vendors too for a long time.
Yeah.
So I just had to trust that the idea was going to work and just do it. Yeah. So we took that risk. And for a year one event, it was perfect. Mm-hmm. There was almost nothing that went wrong. It was a small music venue that we did, one stage. It was not your typical conference venue. The vendor booths were 6-foot tables kind of set up around this back area within a concert hall. This was not a normal conference, but we sold every vendor table. We had an amazing lineup of year one presenters from big construction firms, big owners. Everything fell in place. It was so cool.
Yeah.
That was very reaffirming of people are hungry to learn, like the things that we were hoping to educate on, trying to bring together different trades, different owners, different operators, different service providers, different technologies, all into one event that is focused around capturing data, processing data, creating deliverables, not narrowed to one industry type or project type. It was just confirmation that there is obviously a need there. So the fact year one went well, it was like, that's it. This is a huge focus for us. We are going to be doing this every year. Our goal will be continuing to expand it. Our focus was never money. It wasn't like, okay, how can we just make the most money off of this event?
Yeah.
What's awesome about it growing is it's just continued confirmation of like, look, if it keeps doubling every year, that means we're doing something right. People are getting value out of this from every aspect. Vendors are getting people who are actually interested in their technologies because we're helping make those connections. Owners and people who need service are finding connections. Service providers are connecting and collaborating. So it's gone very well. And so one of my biggest messages that I focus on is we need a lot more education around all these technologies, and collaboration is absolutely key to scaling the industry because there are so many technologies. There's so many different tools from, even if we talked about just laser scanning, there's 20 different laser scanners. There's handheld scanners, there's backpack scanners, there's terrestrial scanners. The processes you use to capture data with those are different. They have different accuracies. You use them in different industries. Until somebody can come together and help rein that in a little bit and help educate people on like, why would you use one scanner versus the other? Why is one $10,000 and one's $120,000? People that are wanting to get into scanning today have so many questions, but they have to figure that out all by themselves. Nobody's really helping guide that path. So education, collaboration, those are like my two missions.
This has become like one of your favorite things to do too.
Ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that just because the people get to be around, or some of the cool stuff's coming in? Probably a little both.
To me, it is zero about the new stuff coming in. I love technology. I see that all the time. I care about people.
Yeah.
Like the success stories that people reach out and are like, dude, I met that robotics company at your conference. We had a problem on our construction job. I remembered meeting them. I reached out. The guy sent me a robot that we could attach a scanner to. We solved this problem. I'm like, that is a real, it happened because of our event. You solved the problem. We're helping people. Same with, other people that are in startups coming to the event. And like, I met a client who's now like helping me grow. Hearing things like that, and knowing a lot of our focus, a lot of the things we want to solve, like the scanner problem and registration workflows and accuracy improvements, a lot of that is coming from difficulties I've lived. So I know the headaches people are going through with scanners, with data, with models. So it's stemming from, there were not many people that I could reach out to help me fix those. I had to learn the hard way. I had projects, I slept in my office for 20 days straight. I didn't have anyone else to reach out to that I knew how to, could solve those problems. I'm excited that proactively I can go, that's still a problem in the industry. How can we help solve that so people don't have to keep, hitting the same headaches that many of us are going over?
You mentioned, so we had our little pre-talk at the coffee shop, and
yeah, thanks for the coffee, by the way, boys. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, and I hope it was a little watered down.
See, I was actually doing work, but whatever.
Well, we were, forging relationships and doing the better thing.
Wow, thanks. Appreciate it.
No, you're not going to juke me that way.
We were doing work. It's a different kind of work.
That's right. Yeah. Doing the work of becoming friends, Tyler.
Yeah, okay. What's that like?
Well, we were talking about a cool airport project. So,
Yep.
That was a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Is that something?
Yeah, we got into that because we were talking about approaching, challenging jobs that you're not exactly sure how to undertake. You think you do. And sometimes you end up with a result that you didn't expect. This wasn't exactly that scenario, but it bridged that conversation where I was like, I have gotten addicted to trying to take on very complex problems and help it be successful, because it is challenging. The method in which you approach a very complex project, it's so different than like, hey, I have this little building I need scanned. Okay, how do you take on a 3 million square foot airport terminal that has baggage claims and ins and outs, and you have control, and you only have a certain time frame. There's no way you could use terrestrial that long, but you need a certain accuracy. I love somebody coming to me with a problem that they think is not possible and trying to reverse engineer, like, okay, this is possible. It's going to be very difficult. We're going to have to work really long hours. We have to work at night. We need to schedule with TSA and all these different airlines, and like one of the most complex projects. But yeah, it was a massive terminal. We had a very short window. The client was like, look, we have this long. If we don't get it done by this date, we can't do the project because funding changes and all these other things. And we, talked about scope, talked about a proposal, and they were like, if we approve this, you need to be here in like a week. And we took 8 people. Yeah, very challenging. But we did the majority of the job. We did a complex process to set survey control throughout the entire project. And we ended up using mobile mapping for the majority of the capture. One of the biggest problems that somebody else might have faced doing that project is assuming that the mobile mapping by itself would have been good enough without the process of establishing the control. Mobile mapping builds error. You get drift, you get all kinds of problems. We ended up taking, if you look at a whole floor of an airport, we ended up running survey control all over the place, setting it all over the floor. That's also complex in an airport because you're not allowed to put stickers up. You can't leave permanent markers. You can't drill something on the floor. So the way that we set control is identifying like, here's a center point in the corner of this tile. And we're going to like put a temporary paper right here with a number, take a picture. And so now we know, and we have to build this whole book of like where those temporary controls are. Really, we're shooting existing just points in the building. But you can use that with certain scanners. You can go and collect a point on that. And so we had to break it up into smaller chunks in order to reduce the error. There's so many things we could talk about, but that was the approach to that job. Very complex. The thing, again, that I'm excited about with education is I want to proactively help figure out some of those types of workflows. What is possible? How big of an area can you capture with mobile? How much control do you need for it to meet the accuracy you're trying? How much drift do you get over a certain length? There's nobody out there helping define that. Like every scanner manufacturer wants to sell everybody a scanner, and then the users of those scanners go try things and they fail at them, and then they revise it, and then they try it again and it gets a little better, and then they try it, and it takes so much user error for each individual to figure out what is possible with the scanner. My goal with some of that education is like, we as an industry should start working together to define some of that. Like, what is the best practice in how to capture XYZ at certain accuracy? What scanner can be used? What, processes? I think there's a lot of work to do there.
Define mobile mapping for me.
To me, so mobile mapping would be being able to scan as you move.
Yeah.
So there's handheld devices that you can walk and it's capturing data. There's backpack devices you can walk and capture data. Those would all be mobile scanning as opposed to stationary, on a tripod, let it run for a few minutes. So
right. Looks like the old piece of surveying equipment we're used to seeing.
Yep.
Yeah. So the mobile mapping you can move about with.
Would you have more drift in the mobile mapping solution? I would imagine so, right? It's like, I would imagine it's also getting a little bit better too as the technology advances. But if you're moving, that would kind of play with things.
Yeah, the mobile mapping is far more advanced today than it was 3 years ago. Like it's improving a lot. But with those two different types of scanning, with mobile scanning, you get drift issues because it's going, capturing as you go, and you don't know how much drift you have until you have it. And if you don't have survey control, you don't have something to verify against that, hey, I walked 300 feet from one end to the other. Mm-hmm. Okay, how do you know that there's not drift? Is it up or down or left or right? If you don't have a control point at the end of those 300 feet to verify and say that target is this number, this target is this number, and you can see a deviation, you're hoping your data is okay.
Yeah.
And the bigger the job, the more important that is, the more critical it is, because that 3 million square foot of airport terminal, 4 levels, multiple areas, small halls, different, like if you didn't have control, you're going to have areas of that are 3 feet off. Like massive problems. Someone goes and tries to use that on a construction job.
Yeah.
What happens? Who does it go back to? Who captured the data? How did they do it? What? So that's one of the reasons I talk about survey control so much, is that the majority of people, if I had to guess, the majority of people scanning are not surveyors. They don't even know that that's needed. I am from survey background. I do not preach that only surveyors should scan. I do not believe that at all. I do think the awareness of when or how or why you need control is very critical, because the last thing we as an industry want is someone thinking all they need is the scanner and that, yeah, it's mapping the space and we walked this whole thing. Then you end up with bad data, bad problems, bad rep. The service provider gets hurt. They get in trouble. They lose a client. The client doesn't trust the technology. It creates this huge negative snowball effect if people implement the technology wrong.
Is there a project size where it starts to make sense? Like, I mean, I'm thinking of like some of the smaller projects that we've even scanned. Like, it doesn't feel like on a small scale it's completely necessary to have the survey control.
Nope, it's not.
At what point does it start to make sense? I guess when you're starting to go up floors, when you're starting to, it's a lot longer, all of these different factors could apply, but kind of break that down.
So I think there's a few different factors. One is, how accurate do you need the data to be?
Right.
Because if you're looking for super, super, super tight tolerances, I would recommend it even on very small projects, because it is the secondary method to verify how accurate your data is. Because what happens if you go out and scan in an area and then you bring that in and process it, and how do you know for sure that your data didn't tilt a little bit?
Yeah.
Or that you didn't get a little bit of distance, issues, or that your scanner maybe got banged or something and is uncalibrated. You may not even see it in the data. The benefit of the control, even on a very small project, is if you have a certain tolerance you need to meet, if you go in there and you use a total station, you shoot some control targets, you now have a second thing to verify and say, we checked our points, they line up to this level of accuracy. So now if something happened on a job, someone came back and said this data wasn't good enough, you have 2 sets of data to confirm and verify and say, here's the report, it was this accurate, we got verification twice. Like, that is that is a big, big safety factor in like liability.
Yeah.
So accuracy matters. If you're looking for a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch or an inch and it's a small space, like, you don't have to have control. So I would say it depends on the liability you want to carry and checking that piece. But if I was to throw out a square footage number to be safe, is, I would say 10,000 square feet or more, I would typically recommend it, because, and if you're doing multiple floors of buildings, you're doing inside, outside, it's not a lot of work to have some control. There are surveyors everywhere.
Yeah.
To have a local surveyor even just come in and shoot a few targets for you just to confirm. So there's a lot of factors to it.
Yeah.
Size of job, accuracy requirements, and what is the data being used for, so that you can kind of take that as a recipe and say, okay, we are verifying floor flatness. We need to make sure that data is level. It's way better to go ahead and spend the extra, whatever it is, few $100, $1,000, 15, like half a day a surveyor come shoot some targets, you're going to be a little safer with your data.
Gotcha. Yeah, that kind of answers my workflow question too, as setting survey, basically getting all that stuff in order. do I need to get a surveyor to come out and actually do that? Or is that something like, hey, I've got a total station close enough, that sort of thing? It sounds like, no, get a surveyor out there.
Yep.
Let's establish this baseline first, make sure it's dead on, and then we scan, and then we can link everything together.
And there's a couple, that's optional, right? It still, to me, comes back to just at least talking through that process with whoever's doing the scan or whoever's considering that and saying, look, can you get a total station and get trained on how to shoot some of your own targets? Yes. But now you're still the one liable for the accuracies. So if you're not an expert in that, and I would say the bigger project, the more complex it is, the more that it's just worth saying, I want an expert who knows how to come run traverses and distribute error and verify, it gets complex. And operating total stations and running really tight control networks and shooting targets is way more difficult than running a scanner. Personally, I would say let someone who that's what they do come in and do that control piece. You do the scan, you do the, and now they also are giving you that verification of like, this is how accurate we said it is. Here's our report. And if a problem arises, then you can go back to them and say, they're the ones who did the control. Here's,
That's a good clarifier, because in my head, I'm like, all right, well, do I need to go out and get a total station to go out and set that stuff for myself? In the liability aspect of it is perfect way of putting that. I mean, if you want to take the liability on, by all means. But I mean, it does. Surveying is not an easy thing. Even with a lot of the technology advancements that we've seen in total stations, it's like, no, this is still difficult.
It's very, total station work and survey control networks is way more complex. I mean, you have to have much more training. There are minor things that can go wrong that throws your control off. I mean, you are setting up over a point. You need to be exact with that. You need to measure your height. There's so many steps that a very skilled survey person, that they have years of training in that. They know exactly how they're setting up. I would recommend that. Now, when a company is doing their own scanning and they get to a certain point, if you're doing a lot of projects and you're having control all the time, then I'd hire someone who knows how to do that really well. And bring it in-house if you want. Even if it's not a licensed surveyor. Like if you don't have to have licensed survey work on that project, but you do need your own control just so your data is very accurate for what you're doing, then hire someone that maybe has the survey experience to come in and be that field person they could run their control and do the scan. I definitely see that happening in construction firms, GCs, things like that, where, sometimes their field technology group actually has a surveyor on it. Even though they're not doing traditional survey work, they're bringing that expertise into the technology teams.
The mobile mapping thing is something that I want to explore more. But one of the things that I think you may remember, I called you about, it was the Carolina Panthers stadium or something. Like I just heard about this project and needed to be scanned. Well, so, we probably had no business even thinking about it. And I figured that out pretty quick. But it made the brain wander. It made the imagination.
How would I go about this?
What in the world would I even do? I'll call Matt. And so, and we're talking through it. And I was thinking through the terrestrial station-based scans. I'm like, what is this? Like 2,500 stations? How would I even do that? And then I'm thinking about getting into rooms.
Yeah.
Like it's insane how just going through a door when you're trying to register at either side can be like a thing.
Yeah.
And so every little nook and cranny in a building presents an opportunity for you to not capture that little piece because it's behind something.
Yep.
And mobile, you walk through it.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense, but I had the thought like, well, what about the things that are like really way up in the air?
Yeah.
And so when I hit you up, I was like, man, I want to know a little bit more about like what's going on with the mobile mapping, but drone scanning, right? Because drone scanning, that would be a mobile mapping solution, right? The drone's not just hovering and trying to capture in one spot.
No, it's...
The drone is moving as it captures.
Yes. Yeah.
So like what kind of devices are out there? I'm not looking for you to be like, oh, this is the one I stamp my approval on, but like, what do you know about that side of like the drone scanning when it comes to LiDAR?
Yeah. I think that's an area that's growing too. There's several different devices and platforms out there that are doing LiDAR scanning as a drone flies. And there's kind of different markets and types as well. Like historically, the most investment in LiDAR scanning is big drones for like survey mapping type applications. But there are some other companies out there that are focused on like indoor or tunnels or mining. So like Flyability and Emescent, and there's a few of those that like they are using mobile scanners, and it's doing the mapping as the drone is flying. It's not something that I have a lot of expertise in doing that stuff. You know, we've done a lot of aerial LiDAR work with our survey type work. I'm very excited about that technology for that use, and I've had a lot of people ask like, could we, you know, we have in this warehouse, we have this stuff up in the ceiling, like, could we just fly a drone through there and capture? As of today, I've always said, like, it's not what I would recommend. I think there's still some workflow stuff to do there. Until I test something and I know what I can promise from it, I don't like recommending it yet. Most of the applications of those indoor LiDAR scanning from a drone is like, it's been used in mining, it's been used in tunneling. Most of that data too is not going to be as accurate, as clean, and as tight as even what you get from the backpack type, like a Navis or you know, some of those handheld, you know, the Faro, or the data from the LiDAR on a drone is a little more fuzzy, a little more less accurate. So that's why I think I also wouldn't recommend it. You know, if you're doing steel work or you're doing buildings, I don't yet see the benefit of let's fly it inside, unless maybe it was you know, the use case you're talking about though. If it was a stadium or something like that has a really big indoor open space, then maybe using that as a supplement or an addition to other technology in order to get higher up in the ceiling to get the steel, because it's really far from the ground. Your other best option would be the very expensive, very long range terrestrial scanners, like the really high end Regals, or some of the higher end Leicas, or that scan 1,000 feet or whatever. So that's where it just still gets so challenging. Like, okay, we have this really big space, but we also want really accurate data. So how do you know?
Have you seen anybody mounting? And this is kind of probably a dumb butt question here, but it's something I think of because in film you see them mounting these massive like airy cameras underneath drones that are freaking huge.
Yep.
Right? Would it be possible or advisable even to mount a large freaking scanner on a drone? Would it be stable enough to hold it even in place and scan up and like say some rafters or some trusses or something like that in a stadium?
This is all opinion based, right? We're not giving facts. Don't go out and buy this.
We're not giving facts, but I'm just curious if it's even stable enough at that point.
I don't.
Right?
Some of the drones, they're pretty dang stable.
If they're indoors, right?
But
and they're not getting pushed or anything, I think it'd be possible.
I don't see using a drone to have a large terrestrial scanner try to stay stationary long enough to do a scan. It is heavy. Drones are still moving. If you're doing that with a terrestrial scanner, then the data's gonna be moving a little bit, even if it's just a little bit. Yeah. Then when you go into that terrestrial data, you would see stuff that's messed up and you don't know which one to use. And so I think if you're trying to do UAV LiDAR, it's better to just go with the quality you get from a SLAM-based or mobile system than, Yeah, that's my assumption based on what I.
That's kind of what I was thinking too, but I was just making sure because this is just kind of a dream of mine to mount a $150,000 scanner on top of.
You can see them, like if you Google some of it. I remember years back, there was a massive drone that I don't want to call out the names, but one of the manufacturers put one of their terrestrial scanners on the bottom of a massive drone, and they were flying it at their conference and stuff. And I never used it, but it's not out there. Nobody uses it. I don't think that is trying to remember because it was a long time ago. I think that their approach was mobile anyways. They were they were putting a system together where you could take your terrestrial unit, put it on the drone and turn it into a mobile unit while you were flying.
Yeah.
So it still wasn't terrestrial. It was just kind of letting you use the sensor in multiple ways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the guts of a mobile mapping solution versus something that's just off of a tripod.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah.
Very different.
I mean, I know there's insurance and all that, but I'd be a little afraid to put my terrestrial unit on a drone. I've seen too many drones fall out of the sky.
Come on, man. They do it all the time in movies. What could go wrong? Let's do this thing, you know? Like,
how much is the Airy?
If you kit out an Airy, which is like what they shot John Wick with, like the camera they used on John Wick, $200K pretty easily.
Yeah.
Like the lens itself is probably $50,000.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, it's done.
Oh yeah.
It's just,
it could be done. It could be done.
Could it be done? Should it be done? Those are two different things.
Yeah.
I think I kind of fall right in the middle of like, why the heck not? Let's go. Let's try something fun.
Yeah.
You know?
I know why the heck not, because you're not dealing with the budgets that these movies have.
Yeah.
You gotta have $1 billion to spend on the thing, where $200K is like, whatever.
I mean,
What are you talking about, man? Come on, this is construction.
The other LiDAR systems that are out there, though, are still expensive. They're big. I mean, if you look at a big, nice setup from like Regal and some of those sensors and the drones that carry those, I mean, it's a big market. There's a lot of people buying them. It just comes down to what is your use case. Most of that is large scale exterior.
Guys, I feel like we could hide this in a change order somewhere. Like I feel like we could easily just tuck it away somewhere. Nobody will ever know.
That sounds like a good play.
That's a great play. That's what we do.
We're not giving advice here. That's what
that's what we kind of
established that.
Determined. Oh my gosh. Now I love the new workflows and stuff that are coming out there too. And I recently got to see a scan job out at an airport as well. And dude, just chaos out there. But seeing what's possible with some of this stuff now, like seeing that we're able to move these massive prefab modules into place and they just plug in and it works.
Yeah.
That's bonkers town, man. Like you think about all of the tape measuring you'd have to do. Holy cow. Like, my gosh.
And there's still a lot of people doing that.
Very much so.
That's the other part.
Yeah.
You know, that's the part I'm most excited about. I often get asked, because I focus so much on the new tech and I talk to so many people of like, what's next? What's the next cool thing? What's going to change that? And I'm like, my honest answer is, I don't care what's next. I just want to see the scale, the scaled adoption and the proper workflows of the ecosystem of technology that already exists. There are so many awesome scanning devices. The data is awesome. They're so fast. They're affordable. But there are a lot of people still not using it. There are so many companies that still don't even know it's a thing.
Yeah.
That blows my mind. If you called up, I say it all the time, you call 10 architects, call 10 engineers, call 10 surveyors, 40% maybe have used it on a job. And or like used it once, not use it on every job. The amount of companies that should be using scanning on every project that are 10%.
All right. So let me transition us into a little bit of a new area, a new topic. And I want to just kind of maybe look at one of the, I'll say issues, so like maybe a little problem point. And on the surface, it doesn't seem like a problem that scanning is relatively easy to do. Like I can buy a scanner. I could even rent a scanner. I can bring that out. And then operating a scanner is not terribly difficult. Turning it on, interfacing with the software, pressing the button, and having a scan come in or multiple scans come in. But there's a whole myriad of things that fall down in the order after that. Like, I don't know if post-processing is the right way to speak of that, but like getting everything that you need to actually use the scan.
Yeah.
So can you speak some wisdom into that? Like, do you see a lot of people that are kind of getting in over their head because it is easy to hit play and get something?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I would think that's where the entry point is like, I better learn about this now, right? And then you're out there educating people on the thing.
A lot of data, not sure what to do with it though.
Like, shoot.
How do I use it?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it does start all the way from the beginning, like you said. Pressing play on a scanner Pretty easy. Anybody could do that. You set it up, you press start, it scans, it's done, you do another one. The knowledge of how to apply that to different job sites, smaller, bigger projects. Again, we've talked about it a little bit, but the control piece, like how accurate does your data need to be? How do you know it is? Those are things that come with either training or experience, that if you just hand a scanner to a brand new scan tech, do they know how to press play? Yes. But if they go try to tackle a large job by themselves, they're going to mess something up. And they don't even know what they're going to mess up. I mean, like you said earlier, like what's the overlap you need in the field? What happens if you scan in one room and go through the door too far and now you have no overlap and now your building can't come together? There's definitely workflows there. So there needs to be more training on that side. But once you do get into capture, most companies, they love the scanning. They start using it more. They start taking on bigger and more complex projects. That's where you start running into those headaches you didn't expect or you didn't know were a thing. Data is a big one. It does create so much more data than most companies are used to. I just had a conversation about this recently. Someone was like, we just built this server. IT thought we were going to be good. We started like scaling how much we were scanning. And what they thought was a server for 4 years was full in 4 months. Like we've had projects that we've went to tackle that our desktops did not have enough space to do the processing. Like individual projects that were 2 terabytes of scan data.
Yeah.
Most people do not have a computer with that much space on it.
Yeah.
Because before reality capture, before laser scan data and point clouds and all this, CAD drawings, Revit models, like
couple megabytes.
Yeah.
It's not much.
Less than a gig.
Yeah.
Now we're getting data sets that are hundreds of gigs. I mean, we just finished a job a couple months ago, maybe 2 months ago, that was 4,000 scans. Like just the time of processing that, splitting that up into different levels, exporting and unifying those files. It is so much data that data is still one of the biggest problems with capture. Once you get through the workflows, which is still difficult, and scanner types, then what computer are you planning to use? Today, most people are not using something that is what it should be, because the people starting to get into this data and get into scans and get into using it are architects and engineers, construction, survey, and most of their default computers are what's cheap but good enough. Like that's what they have. So I've been on calls. There was someone worked at a city. I'm not going to call it the city, but he was like, we've started scaling our scanning on this wastewater plant, and like, I was doing virtual meetings with him, helping train him on scan registration. Half the time we're on the call, he's like, sorry, man, I got the blue screen of death. It's just sitting here spinning. And I'm like, what are you running on? And he's like, oh, this is like a 5-8-year-old laptop that I'm like, look, you can't go out and buy $100,000 scanner and try to use a $1,500 laptop. You're going to kill yourself. Like you're the data processing speed, the time, the headaches, you have to set up your team that's going to use the data to be successful. And so when we started running into that early, I didn't know a lot about computers. But our immediate plan was, let's build the best computer we can build, because we don't want to sit there and wait. We don't want to sit there and watch the screen spin. We don't want the blue screen of death. People are waiting on that data now. You get done with a scan job, people are like, okay, we need our deliverables. And the speed of processing by upgrading your computer, tremendous difference. Even the difference of going from a really good laptop to a really good desktop, night and day difference. I always recommend, if you're starting to get into a lot of scanning, have a really powerful desktop in your office that is what you process the data on. Obviously, you can get good mobile stations, and sometimes that's necessary. You start processing stuff in the field, or you're traveling and you do it in the hotel. But when you start getting into big jobs, a powerful desktop will make a night and day difference. I got pretty excited about the data processing piece. A while back, we actually started focusing on building our own computers. And part of the focus there was like, man, I want to start getting in and playing with different types of systems to figure out what is the best build for drone mapping software. Like, what kind of parts of the computer is it using? And what about when you get into terrestrial data? Well, the softwares use different parts of the computers. And, obviously that was one of those entrepreneurship things of like, let's just do it ourselves. And I got excited because we ended up actually talking with Dell Technologies, and they were interested in like, we see this as a market. We see this as a problem. We're curious to dig into this data. So we have, a focus there of even trying to help the manufacturers of computers understand what's necessary for the users of this data. This industry of reality capture and laser scanning and drone mapping is growing massively. And this data management piece, the data processing piece, the power that's needed for processing is a huge need.
I guess we probably just back reference where we had Ken on, Ken Flanagan on from Dell, coaching us up on like what to look for. I mean, and they're engineering these boxes out and like they're doing things. We did that same thing. Like back in the day, it was always like, hey, Tyler, build us something cool, right? And like
that was the solution, because I was the only person here in the office that knew how to build computers.
Yep.
And oh my gosh, it's not scalable, because as soon as I took on the managerial tasks, then I'm managing a team, and then I'm also trying to build a computer on the side, and it's just not something that will scale. So having something that's like plug and play, we know this will get the job done. It just streamlines your operations on so many different levels. But Ken's a bud and a mutual friend here, so that they've been a big part of obviously helping out our show too.
We noticed this pretty immediately when we started scanning, like the processing side of things. That was just, it was unexpected.
Yes. We
didn't expect that. Like it was you go out to the field and you scan, you figure that's the job.
Yeah.
I go to the field, I'm scanning. I'm scanning. That's what I wanted to do. That's maybe even what I'm being paid to do. I've scanned. Okay, but then there's all this other stuff that has to happen back at the shop to actually make that useful to somebody, or even convey it to somebody. Like, who am I going to give it to?
Yeah.
How am I going to give it? How much does that weigh?
Scanning.
What do I use to send it to them?
Yeah. Scanning is 20% of the job.
Yeah.
Doing the capture, 20%. You need to think about all those things we've talked about: the control, the process, the workflows, the overlap, Then you get back to the office, and that's the 80% of the job is processing that data, making sure it's accurate, doing the registration process, getting it to the right file types, taking it into whatever software you're going to model or create drawings or do analysis. Like, that is the bottleneck now for the industry. Like, scanners are flying off the shelves, actually. Like, scanning is growing. It's becoming more normal, more expected, more demanded. The amount of people who are experts in using that data, that is a slim resource pool. And honestly, the resource pool on both sides is slim. You cannot just go hire some expert scanner to your company. That's very few and far between across all the US. Anyone right now that goes to hire an experienced scanning person has to steal them from another company. And now that company needs to hire another one and steals it from someone else. It's not like there's 10,000 new, graduates that are experts in scanning that are just ready to come work for you. So that comes back to another challenge in scaling this, even after the technology piece, is the expertise that it takes to really get a lot from that data. And the fact that there's not very many people producing those people. Like, universities are starting to touch it. Like, there are certain construction management programs or BIM departments or things like that they get into introducing you to what a scanner is and maybe how to press the button. But there is nobody really producing trained people that can come into these roles. I try to talk about that a lot, because there's a lot of people that don't know what they want to do when they get out of high school. And then they they go into college for something that somebody suggested and they get a degree that they don't end up using. And I'm like, man, if somebody comes to me and says, my kid doesn't know what they want to do yet, I'm like, find an internship with somebody who does this work. In 2, 3, 4 years, you're going to have a really high paying job because it is in demand. People are paying for it and it's not that hard to get into. And if you, I talked about this recently with someone. I was like, you could suggest right now to a high schooler, get out your iPhone, download a scan app on it, play with it for a bit, scan some cool stuff, YouTube some videos about what laser scanning is, how it works. Build a resume that says, here's some things I'm playing with. I'm very interested in mapping. I think point clouds and this application, like you build that and you then get on LinkedIn, reach out to some people in the laser scanning market, to some construction firms, engineering firms, and pitch yourself to them. 100% you will get a job as an intern because everybody is trying to hire in these types of roles. And even if you get someone entry level with almost no experience, but shows that they've touched it, they're interested, they're willing, they have a drive to like get in, please.
Yeah. Golly, man. That's crazy. Like that's an example of how many opportunities there are in our industry. But I mean, it's funny too. Like you get into scanning, let's say you use that as your into the industry. There are other industries out there that need this too. Insurance is one of them, right? Like
every industry,
manufacturing.
That is part of what had me launch my business in the first place. Yeah. When I started Nexus 3D Consulting in 2016, it was because the previous few years, when I first got into scanning, I was at a survey firm and doing very traditional survey work. We also worked in the oil and gas fields in Bakersfield, California. And the first thought of how we could use a scanner when we got pitched was like, those facilities, the piping, the complexities, the tanks, like those are so complicated. We could go scan those. And that was our entry into how we used it. But throughout that time, I started getting on LinkedIn a bunch. I was sharing examples of the work we did. I showed a point cloud. And then we started getting requests into industries we didn't work in. Our survey company was not in buildings. We were not in buildings at all. We were all like civil, site, oil and gas. Architects started asking us to come scan buildings. We were like, okay, this is cool. Like, yeah, we could try that. And we started getting into that. We did a warehouse. We got asked to come do a construction defect project for a forensic case of a failing parking structure. Another application of like, wouldn't have ever thought to go pursue that, but can the technology solve the problem you're trying to do? Yeah, like we'll try it. We'll come do it. We'll do the methods. We'll give you the data. And they're like, okay, we need you to take that data and figure out how thick and how thin are the slabs at certain points along this floor. Okay, well, if we run accurate control on both floors and we scan both floors and we slice the data, we could put dimensions and tell you the differences. Like nobody before we tried that was solving that problem. You could take the time to core holes in certain spots and pull tape measures and you could do that in a few positions, but you're not going to do that every foot across a floor. Scan data was like, that was a mind-blowing way to them to be able to look at that thickness at any point along that floor. Then getting asked to go do a fishing vessel in Alaska, getting asked to do a gold mine in California. When I started seeing the applications in different industries, that's what really got me excited. That is one of the reasons I started my company is I was like, I want to explore all of the ways to apply this. I want the ability to say yes to go try to help anyone I want solve a problem where, if you're in a certain firm that's wanting you to use the data, they want it used for their type of way. They may say, no, we don't want you to go explore that. I got way too excited about the tools, the technologies, and wanting the ability to go explore. So every market, movie sets are scanning.
Yep.
Every movie set is using LiDAR if they can, if they know somebody who can do it. Like it's growing there. It's growing in forensics. It's growing in mining. It's growing in oil and gas facilities, buildings, warehouses. Every type of industry that has existing structures at some point needs it. That is why I'm really excited about the future of it. Is it's not widespread yet. There's a little bit of it being done in every industry, but every industry has a lot of growth, which means the demand for it is going to grow like crazy. In the future, I believe every building, every facility, every road, every bridge, every home, I think, will have a digital twin, which starts with being able to have true information of what is currently there. So I see so much growth ahead in this industry.
BIM has a similar problem in that finding technicians stateside is difficult. You got to steal them from somebody if you want somebody with experience. And that has created a climate. And, you know, there's a lot of opinion about this, but it's a more global effort now.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
So BIM goes overseas because BIM can.
Yeah.
BIM can go overseas.
Yep.
The problem that you're talking about, you have to be here
To do the capture.
to do the thing.
Yeah.
And it can't go overseas. So this is a harder problem to solve.
It is. And it creates so much opportunity too. Because it has to be here. It can't be outsourced. It means the opportunity is here.
Yes.
The people in the States can fill that they have to fill the opportunity.
They have to.
And, you know, there are so many steps of the data processing side, the deliverable creation side, all of those that also could be outsourced. And I mean, that could be a whole podcast right there is talk about outsourcing.
Yeah.
I am a big believer that we need to do some level of outsourcing overseas to be able to meet the demand of the industry. The biggest problem with outsourcing, and the reason it has such a terrible rep in our industry, is that there are 1,000 companies overseas that all promise to give you amazing deliverables for $5. Like, right? It's just, everybody promises that. Some of them are terrible. Some of them are awesome. The biggest problem is that people try to outsource work that they don't understand. They don't have someone who has experience with. The majority of people in the States, they want to make the money off of taking on the work. So they throw it over there. They cross their fingers. They get something back. They hand it to the team or the client, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
The only way to really scale and use outsource properly in a way that's effective, that's beneficial, is you have to have that expertise in-house to an extent. At least have a few people that understand it, that know how to vet it, that know how to write a workflow, a guideline, a deliverable requirement, an accuracy level, whatever type of modeling it is, whatever platform it's in. You have to have that expertise at least at a project management level so that you can communicate that properly, you can vet the deliverable, you can send it back and ask for the revisions of things that didn't come back right, and or your team is at least able to finish like the 20% that maybe the outsource didn't finalize. If you can do that process, absolute win. And so many people are doing that. The biggest problem is if you don't.
You still have a data problem at that point though.
Yeah.
Which is huge. It's like, because you were talking about 4,000 scans, if it's 2 terabytes, like,
yeah.
I mean, can you upload it? Yeah. It's
Yeah.
going to take you a flipping eternity to do it. And then you
Yep.
also got to consider like turnaround times and all that stuff
Yep.
too. Like I deal with this every day
Yep.
with video. Like our files are huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
And then you also have to have a duplicate of it to make sure that, okay, one hard drive craps out on me. I've
Yep.
got a spare.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to make sure that that's a different brand. Like there's a
Yep.
data management component of
Totally.
this is huge.
Totally. And that does get into some of those tedious workflows and things
Yeah.
that a lot of new people don't know, or they haven't figured out, or they don't, how do we take that 4,000 scan job and make the data usable? Because
Yeah.
initially it's impossible. It's way too big. It's way too much. Nobody's going to open that and start modeling from it. Or
Yeah.
You have to go through processes of scaling it down, breaking it into phases. Maybe it's per floor, and then you create sections of that, and you have some naming, conventions so people know, like, okay, first floor A, B, C, D. Here's like a section, so you model a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
When you export that data, you can unify it. Well, how much do you unify it by? Is it dense enough to now model the features you need? There's so many of those parts that's where we still get into like, this is more complex than just rent a scanner, scan a job, you're done.
Yeah.
Especially when you get into detailed jobs, high accuracy jobs, complex sites, really big projects. It gets complicated.
It's that strategy and tactics thing.
Yeah.
Like scanning's a strategy, a project strategy that we're going to use, but there's tactics that fuel that to make the strategy a win. And I mean, so you got to get into the tactical side. Like it might be a great strategy, but you got to get into the tactical side of things to make it succeed, or it's not going to.
Yep. I'm not going to give all the information about it away, but we're close to announcing our agenda for our conference this year. One of the presentations will be on a massive meta project. Some of the stats I was told, 36,000 scans, over 10,000 control points.
Yeah.
This is, again, what comes back to why I love the education piece and the conference piece is we are cultivating presentations that are people solving complex projects. How are they using it in different industries? What was their workflow? What were some of the lessons learned? If we keep doing that every year, we film those presentations, we create educational videos out of those, we build a library of those educational videos, we create social clips that we put out and inspire people to consider it for that type of job. We can solve some of these problems by building the awareness before people get started or before they hit that headache of like, maybe I should go watch that before I try to tackle a project of that size.
Yeah.
The lessons learned that comes from the community sharing project case studies, workflow examples, it helps the whole industry. And it is a challenge. There are a lot of people that have the competitive, I don't want to tell everyone my secrets. I figured this out. And people ask me that all the time because I was really early in scanning. I've hit so many of these headaches that it puts a leg up in my scanning company. But I see the benefit of that, cliche saying of the rising tide lifts all boats. I believe in that so much. I'm actually not paying attention to my boat anymore. I actually want to only focus on rising the tide because if all the boats are just sitting there hoping the tide rises, well, it's not. You actually have to find efforts of how can we help that process for the industry? And we've identified so many of these things as industry-wide problems that not very many people are focused on actually trying to solve in a way that helps everyone.
So I've got a burning question for you. I got a tactical question for you. And this is going to be, just mind-blowing to everybody that I'm at this level of tactic. But I want to know, how do you keep every craft laborer on the site from coming up and looking directly into the scanner while you're trying to do your job? How do you keep that from happening? Those things are like a magnet.
Oh, they are.
It's when you put it out, everybody's like,
what's that?
I'll
bet that costs a lot of money.
Am I on TV?
Yeah.
Oh.
Right.
I'm always like, smile.
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh.
It's like $10 at your local Kmart. No, don't
yes, it's worth a lot of money.
Don't touch
it. And I'm standing here with all of you.
Yeah. I will say that that's actually one of my favorite things. Not so much on a closed job site, but scanning in public where people really don't know. And even, I'll throw out the Naviz scanner too, because it has an obvious look to it. The big old
hilarious.
white backpack.
Yeah.
Walking through the airport with that on, people thought there were so many questions. Is this like a RoboCop? Is this what are you doing? No, you get a lot of fun questions. And that's a problem, especially with stationary scanners. One benefit is terrestrial scanners are getting so fast nowadays that you get a lot less problem with that because it's spinning so fast that if someone walks by, you get a little bit of shadow, something like that. Man, back when you were doing 5, 6, 7 minutes per scan and it was moving super slow, you'd miss whole areas because someone was in the way. It's a challenge, but typically because of the overlap you're getting doing different stations and people are typically just walking by as opposed to standing still, I don't see it as too much of a problem. But if there's projects where it could be or someone's blocking something, then you got to deal with trying to keep them away. But everybody's interested in what the heck it is.
What do you clean up in? What do you guys use for a software solution to clean up in?
most of the manufacturers' softwares have their own cleanup tools, right? And we use a little bit of everything. We have Leica scanners, Faro scanners, Navis scanners, Regal scanners. So we kind of do the cleanup in its own platform. There's also times, most of that data, because of the use case, we end up taking into Autodesk Recap because it's going to Revit or it's going to Civil, or sometimes we'll go in there to do some final cleanup or clean out. But to be honest, we don't do a lot of cleaning because typically you don't need to. And people ask about that all the time. Like, hey, if there's stuff in the way, is that okay? If there's material on site, is it okay? If people are working there, is it okay? It's like our goal is scanning the structure. It's scanning the walls. So does it matter that there's people in the data or like stockpiles or anything like that? Not really, because we're not trying to showcase a super beautiful point cloud 90% of the time. We're trying to just get the data to make a model or pull the measurements from or something like that. So we don't often clean the data. We let normal filters clean it out, and then we just let it be. Yep. Unless we have to deliver a nice clean data set, then it's typically a process. Some of the softwares like we use Leica scanners quite a bit, the RTCs, and they've got some good processes. You can if you're scanning outdoors, you scan a road and sidewalk, and there's cars and there's people. You can select this plane, and it will highlight everything that's above that. It can, because it has some algorithms where it can see, hey, from this scan and this scan, there's a point that was in there in one, but not the other. So it knows that it was a moving object, and it will highlight it, and you can automatically clean it out. Doesn't get 100% of it, but there are some cool tools in a lot of the softwares.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. I'm wondering, like, for workflows, do you guys try to work after hours much? Like, I've often thought, it might be good for me to be here on like a chill Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Or a lot better than like at Grand Central Station time.
Yeah. Back in the day when it was just me, I worked all the time. I had to be the one traveling and scanning and registering and cleaning and fixing and what I worked nights. I did a lot of things. As our team has grown, we have people that are dedicated to the capture, people dedicated to processing, people dedicated to modeling or project management, so it's not often we have to do a lot of like late nights, overnights. I mean, there are times with some of those really big jobs that we make it a point of like, okay, at the end of the day, start the export because it's going to take 10 hours or something. Or, over the weekend, we upload this data set that's hundreds of gigs. So we know it's going to sit there. We try to do things like that at times, but we try to make it a focus too and make sure that we're not overworking people. And however, when you're in a service industry, there are times that, yes, like I mentioned a project, it'll be a project I remember forever of helping someone fix scan registration on a almost 2 million square foot project. It was very messed up. I care about clients so much and trying to help them and solve the problem that if someone's like, we're so behind, like, can you try to save on this? I literally took a sleeping bag and slept on my floor at my office for 16 days straight. Like, I would work until something was exporting or I was like freaking passing out. And then I'd wake back up and I get back on and I keep trying. I had to sit there and manually try to fix all this data. It was the only way to do it. So there's times, right? And that comes down to if you're in a service industry, how can you set yourself apart and help your clients, let them know they can rely on you? I am a big believer in that there's special times that we'll go above and beyond. But if we can have workflows in place to avoid that, we try to.
Yeah, absolutely. Not first pick. There.
No.
All right. Well, I think I want to ask you our megaphone question.
Ooh, megaphone question.
It's been a minute.
Oh.
Yeah, this is your second one.
This is your second megaphone. It's probably changed over the years. We've been doing this 5 years now, man. We've been doing this a while. I think we started the podcast at around the same time, right? Ish.
You guys were a little before us.
Was it just a touch before?
I think so.
Golly, man, that's crazy. Yeah. It's been that long. Anyway, so the megaphone question. So if we gave you a megaphone in around 60 seconds, speak to the whole construction industry, what would you want to say?
Oh, man. That's such a big one.
I know. It's wonderful.
I would say
it stumps everybody.
The things that come to mind for me are like, don't be afraid of change. Change is hard, but typically it comes with very awesome results because it's hard. Pursue hard things. Pursue innovation. Like so much of our industry, we do get stuck at being comfortable in a workflow. We don't want to try something because it's difficult, it's risky. We don't know how it's going to come out. Try new things. The amount of new technologies that are coming into the industry, it is mind-blowing. The direction that it's going, the curve we're on in innovation just taking over the job site is crazy. There's so much opportunity with it. If you're somebody that sees this technology and you're excited about it, don't stop and go, my job is CAD. I can't really get into that. My company doesn't want to do it. Jump off the deep end, start learning about it. And if your company is not innovative or they won't let you be innovative, find a company that will. Because there's massive opportunity. I'm a big believer in find something you love doing for work. Like if you can enjoy going to work every day, your career will transform. If you can become passionate about something, you'll want to do it more. You'll be the learner. So really pursue innovation, pursue change, pursue technology, and don't stay comfortable.
Yeah. Don't stay comfortable. I like that one. Thanks for coming down, man.
Yeah, it's been fun.